There are so many in desperate need, and it often seems that their cries go unheard. Well, this morning, Denise Richardson introduces us to some remarkable people, people of great compassion, great courage, people who will restore your faith, I think, in humanity.
This is a story about people who stick their necks out. It's about a couple who feed the poor. It's about a high school counselor who takes in troubled teens. It's about a woman who gets food to homebound AIDS patients. And it's about the woman who recognized their good works and the efforts of hundreds like them.
And this was your Giraffe project at your class?
Yeah.
To do that.
Meet Ann Medlock, head of the Giraffe Project. That's giraffe as in stick your neck out. For 10 years, she and her small staff outside Seattle have publicized the efforts of people who worked for the common good. So far, 700 giraffes have been named worldwide.
We have people who are cleaning up rivers. They're keeping ex-cons from going back to prison. They're saving street teens from pimps. They're feeding hungry people. You name a problem, there's a giraffe on the ground making headway against that problem.
Hold the pins.
Oh, okay, got it. No.
Carol and Hurt Porter are making headway against hunger. Working out of their small home, the Porters and a handful of volunteers prepare and deliver 6,000 meals a month to hungry children in Houston. Kid Care is the nation's first Meals on Wheels program for children.
We got to save the children. These are our children, and we have to think of them as our children. And so, through Kid Care, we're hoping to save this generation. We've lost one generation to drugs, and if we don't do something, we're losing an entire generation to hunger.
Morning, Kid Care.
Kid Care!
Kid Care. Hi, how you doing?
It's done almost entirely through private donations. The Porters are wary of government red tape.
Carol and I are a strong believer in the private sector doing the work. In fact, the donations that we get to feed these hungry children come from private sector. And we feel strongly that the private sector can actually end the hunger problem in the United States.
This is our Kid Care baby.
Soon the Porters hope to move their operation to larger quarters. That means more meals, more space for their tutorial programs, more room for their work with parents.
If two people can feed 6,000 children a month and end hunger among these 6,000, imagine if it was multiplied time and time again.
Do you have a quarter on you? You can take a cab.
When troubled teens in Everett, Washington have no one to turn to, they turn to Sari Kreisman. Kreisman was so concerned that some teens did not have a place to sleep at night that she couldn't sleep. So she gave up her counseling practice and started Cocoon House.
The kids that we serve are from shattered families. They're from trauma families. They're kids who are afraid of being abused at home or who have been abused at home. They're running from abuse, or they're kids who have just been kicked out and have no home to ever turn to again.
Kreisman and her volunteers have made Cocoon House a way station for teenagers. Some go to foster care, some to a relative. And as Kreisman has embraced the teens, so has the community embraced her. Cocoon House exists primarily on community support.
Somebody had to do this. Somebody had to open up a program for these kids. They needed someplace to go. Nobody else was going to do it. And now I do it because I love to do it. I feel like it gives me a purpose. I know why I'm on Earth now. I look around me and all I see is chaos. I see our world just doing all kinds of chaotic, crazy things. And I feel like I'm pushing against the chaos. I'm making a difference.
You want this one. We want this one. Yes, we do.
One day, Ganga Stone saw something that changed her life.
I saw one individual who was homebound because of AIDS and who had nothing to eat and no money. And for me, that one sight was so riveting and so impossible to forget that it called before me my life's work in that moment.
That life's work has become God's Love We Deliver, a program to feed persons with AIDS who are too weak to feed themselves. It takes some 1,200 volunteers to get gourmet quality food to their clients throughout the New York City area.
How are you? It's so good to see you.
Stone says no one is turned away.
I honestly think that if I did not have the service in the last 2 months since the wasting syndrome has been getting worse, I don't know if I would be here.
I do this because I must, and I do this out of love, and I do this because it gives me tremendous happiness.
These people have answers in a practical sense because they've all started something that works. And they also, in their own spirits, are the answer because they're not passing the buck. They're not saying, let somebody else figure this out. Let an agency figure out what to do about this. I see a problem. I'll take a chance. I'll do something about it myself.
People see homeless people on the television set, and they can turn them on or off.
I realized in my research that there was very little Spanish language literature to educate individuals on the environment or environmental preservation and conservation.
Each of these women saw a problem and decided to fix it. For Darlene Xiomara Rodriguez, who was 11 years old at the time, it was the destruction of her Florida Everglades community.
I became more informed about what was happening in the environment. So with that, I developed a bilingual brochure in English and in Spanish, mainly to educate and inform them about the Everglades and the precious resource we have here in Florida as the only Everglades in the world.
For Beverly Graham, it was the homeless of Seattle.
I always saw people digging out of garbage cans. I used to see this one old woman who slept over a grate with plastic bags. I started thinking about people who did not eat for days. That was why I took a lunch the first time, was to say, you know, here's a lunch, something to eat.
A giraffe has to take risks. Darlene was 15 when she became a giraffe 9 years ago. The obstacles she faced included prejudice.
Who do you think you are? You're too young. You don't know any better. You have an accent. Go back to where you came from.
The award made a huge difference in her life.
I was able to apply for several programs and projects and scholarships. And because of the notoriety of the Giraffe Project and what they do, people began to ask me for interviews or to meet with them solely on the fact that I had something called the Giraffe Project on my resume or my application.
Beverly took risks of a different kind when she started Operation Sack Lunch 9 years ago.
I guess I was somewhat civilly disobedient because I encouraged people to loiter to eat. You know, they sat down to eat their lunch. It was difficult for the first few years because, you know, the police detained me, the health department detained me, and I kept on doing it because I knew it was the right thing to do.
Beverly sees what she does as just the first step in a bigger process.
I guess what my real mission has become is giving everybody a face and a name. Saying that if we don't take care of each other, why should anybody else bother?
When neo-Nazis called for an all-white nation in the Pacific Northwest, Father Bill Wasmuth became a giraffe. He stuck his neck out for equality and human rights. Then his house was bombed. Olga Bloom is also a giraffe. She took a risk for the sake of art. And George Hankins is a giraffe, too. He gives tough street kids new hope for the future.
I have an inherent belief that inside everybody there's a giraffe waiting to get out.
I think that really what a giraffe is a person that says there's a certain amount of life that's going to be for me. And there's a certain amount of life that's going to be for other people.
High school is a time when most kids try to be like everybody else. Petra Mastonbrooks, a Seattle high school student who's willing to be different, willing to be mocked by fellow students. Petra's determined to help other kids avoid drug and alcohol addiction.
But Petra discovered that starting a program to combat high school drug abuse meant risking ridicule from fellow students.
They would follow me into the building, calling me names, Miss Goody Two-Shoes, or behind me chanting, I'm a drug addict, I'm a drug addict, things like that. Are you out here to get stoned today, Petra? Things like that.
Still, Petra showed persistence, an essential giraffe quality, and developed a model anti-drug program she even takes into grade schools.
When you stopped using drugs, were there a lot of people on your back, or did they just leave you alone after that?
They did. They left me alone. You have to be firm. It's really hard. I'm not saying it's not. You have to be firm about what you're doing. Okay, the next thing I'd like to teach you are some refusal skills.
Petra tells kids how drugs almost ruined her life and how they can keep from getting hooked.
I really enjoy talking to the grade schools. And I know I've helped some kids because after I've talked, sometimes kids come up and ask for my help, and I see that they get into some sort of program. And so it makes me feel really good. Knowing that I just helped one person, it makes it all worthwhile, knowing that person won't have to go through the pain that I went through.
Hazel. Oh, come on in.
Hazel Wolf was 70 years old when Petra Mastenbrook was born. But she's still sticking her neck out as a leader of opposition to a proposed nuclear waste dump. She edits a widely read environmental newsletter. She's also an avid kayaker, a backpacker, and secretary of a local Audubon society.
Oh, it's handsome. Look at this. Well, I haven't been getting in a lot of trouble, you know, just a little bit.
As a fighter for the environment, Hazel often faces hostile opposition. She meets it with another important giraffe quality, a sense of humor.
A lot of the things that you've done were potentially, you know, serious, that you could get put in jail for some of the things you've gotten involved in. Haven't you ever been afraid that you're going to get put in jail?
Well, not really afraid. I always thought if I ever went to jail, then I could do a jigsaw puzzle without interruption. And the one opportunity I had, I didn't get to finish it because somebody bailed me out.
Patient, quick! Emergency! Take one of these and swallow it at least 3 times a day. If you have trouble swallowing it, just put it in your mouth like this. And you'll feel a lot better.
Laughter is the best medicine, he says.
Right.
But Dr. Patch Adams is a respected physician who believes America's medical system needs radical surgery.
Medicine has become a business, and a very big business. No longer is it perceived as a service-oriented part of the community, but a part of the community where a person can make a lot of money.
Not so for Patch. Until recently, he and several associates offered free medical care to anyone in need.
We used our home for 12 years. We, the staff, worked irregular part-time jobs to pay to help other people.
Financially, their combination home and hospital was a shaky operation.
We have over 1,000 foundation rejections. We have never been able to even remotely interest a state, county, or federal government in any of our work.
But as word about their work spread, people everywhere responded.
Every single state sends us money. We get $1 checks. We get boxes of used sheets from people saying, I know you'll need some sheets.
Today, Patch Adams and his friends have taken temporary leave of medical practice. Here in the hills of West Virginia, they're building a dream. A free hospital where doctors and patients will live and work together in a healing community. Patch calls it the Gesundheit Institute.
We chose the name Gesundheit because it makes people laugh. There's an atmosphere thing that we're trying to create that is happy, funny, loving, cooperative, and creative. And of all of those things, if you don't have humor around human suffering, it will burn you out.
Yes, sirs and madams, I'm Dr. Niedernam, and I'm the genuine representative of not quite the answer products.
Patch also believes doctors ought to be as concerned about preventing illness as they are about treating it. Using humor, he teaches people about healthy living. He calls it his traveling medicine show, and he plays to appreciative crowds all across the country.
You walk on over to your teeth, and you brush them, holding the brush at a 45-degree angle between the teeth and the gum line.
Patch Adams is sticking his neck out to improve our healthcare system, and the medical profession is paying attention.
Medical students, nurses, they hear about our work and they're overwhelmingly supportive. We represent the dream for people. Greed has infected our society. It is the worst infection. And we are a pie in the face of greed. We are taking the most expensive thing in America and giving it away for free.
For hundreds of kids, Fort Apache Youth Center is a haven in a heartless world. It's a place where kids from poor families find pride in themselves, athletic activity, and academic tutoring that keeps them in school.
Read this, and then you have to answer a question.
With your hands in there, you're cheating. That's where you're supposed to have them there. See?
George Hankins, a former Army boxing champion, has been helping young people here since he started this center 15 years ago.
There you go. Keep your arms straight.
Back then, George was a policeman. His beat was a district called Fort Apache, the Bronx, one of the poorest, toughest neighborhoods in America.
You could pick up drugs on any corner, just like you could popcorn in a candy store. It was nothing to have 5, 6, 7 homicides a week. If you want somebody wiped out, no problem. Those guys would do you in for a pack of cigarettes almost, you know. Life was very cheap.
One day, while on patrol, George broke up a gang fight. He took on 2 gang leaders with one hand behind his back and flattened them both.
Come on, come on, come on, keep working, keep working.
The kids made George an offer. Teach us to box like that and we'll disband the gangs. George Hankins gave it a try. But his fellow patrolmen didn't think teaching kids to fight better was such a hot idea.
At first, I got more harassment from my co-workers than I did from anybody in the street.
Then a former gang member came to the aid of a cop and George's efforts were vindicated. George Hankins and George Pearson, another officer, used their personal savings to establish this youth center. They set up athletic and academic programs, but eventually their savings dried up.
Mutual of New York came to our aid, finished paying off the mortgage for us and helped us get our tax exempt status and everything in place, and we started rolling really from there. There you go, that's better. Come in.
Some former youth center members have become boxing champions. Others are lawyers, doctors, and business people. And the streets of Fort Apache have gotten safer.
The crime rate as far as the people that are involved with the Fort Apache Youth Center has gone way down. It's gone way, way down.
For a lot of kids, a giraffe named George is offering a new look at life.
I tell a kid, if you can discipline yourself to do boxing, life is a piece of cake. You can discipline yourself to put yourself through a strenuous exercise program like boxing demands. If you can discipline yourself for that, piece of cake. Everything else is a piece of cake.
The world of chamber music is a far cry from boxing, but Olga Bloom has a lot in common with George Hankins. She saw a need, took a risk, and made a difference.
I'm trying to make clear my passion for installing small excellences as part of a community for the enrichment of all.
On the Brooklyn waterfront sits a former coffee barge, which is now a music hall.
Low barge music.
When Olga Bloom retired as a concert violinist, she didn't retire from life.
In fact, it never stops. We go all year.
She felt America needed more intimate settings where people could experience fine art and get to know the artists.
I was thinking of perhaps corporate foyers, you know, those vast spaces. I thought they could stand a bit of humanizing.
But when Olga saw an old barge advertised for sale, she thought it might be just the place she had in mind. Olga mortgaged her home to buy the barge, then used her savings and her own hands to refinish the interior. But when she looked for a place to moor it, officials said the barge didn't meet city codes.
The hazards were enormous. I had no idea of bureaucratic tangles. But in the beginning days, as I labored very hard, all the working men on the waterfront came to my aid. And whatever I started, people came to help me.
Olga Bloom still works on the barge every day, bringing a little corner of heaven to a dock in Brooklyn.
Okay, ready for business.
People from all walks of life come here to enjoy some of the finest music in the world at the lowest price in New York. All income goes to expenses. Olga lives on a pension.
I'm very happy. I'm terribly poor. This place keeps me totally broke, but I consider that I'm one of the richest women on earth.
A giraffe's habitat may be any place, a big city like New York or a small town. But all giraffes take a risk, and sometimes the risk is life.
This is my body, which will be given up for you.
Father Bill Wasmuth lives in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. It's a western resort town, small, friendly, and traditional. But a few years ago, the peace and quiet here was shattered. They came to northern Idaho calling for an all-white nation in the Pacific Northwest. The Aryan Nations, a racist organization, made Coeur d'Alene its headquarters.
Initially, the community reaction was to just let them be, live and let live, that kind of a philosophy. But then we found out very quickly that such inaction was interpreted by both the Aryans and by the rest of the country as being tacit support, if not active support.
When Aryans began harassing minorities in Coeur d'Alene, concerned citizens formed a task force to defend human rights. As leader of the task force, Father Bill became the symbol of resistance to racism.
I thought that we would be safe because the Aryans would figure out that if they attacked any of us at all, that it would just galvanize the community against them. Unfortunately, we gave them too much credit for thinking.
In 1986, a series of bombings rocked the town of Coeur d'Alene. The first bomb went off here at Bill Wasmuth's house. If he'd been in his kitchen instead of his living room, it might have killed him.
I will consider it, Kay, I really will.
Bill was afraid, but he refused to back down.
I stayed in my house that night, and I stayed in my house the next night. I never left. The community was watching very much on how I responded to this thing, and if I responded in a great deal of fear, they would end up with a lot of fear and panic as well, and I didn't want that to happen.
It didn't happen. The citizens of Coeur d'Alene rallied around Father Bill and the task force, leaving the Aryans alone and defeated.
People really are, their hearts are in the right place on this issue. The community is very anxious to be a model community in terms of openness to all peoples of all races, creeds, and colors.
We can't keep relying on men on white horses and Santa Claus and all of these mythical beasts who are going to save the world for us. It really is up to us.